This is day 22 of the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, welcome to Legalbytes. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. So in my opinion, today ultimately was a win for Johnny Depp, though not without some blood drawn by Amber Heard's team against Johnny Depp specifically. To give you a bit of a roadmap, we heard from Kate Moss, Dr. Shannon Curry, Johnny Depp, Morgan Tremaine, Brian Newmeister, and Beverly R Leonard. Let's start with Kate Moss. Now, she was one of the most anticipated rebuttal witnesses in this trial, and her testimony was ultimately short, sweet, and to the point. If you're not familiar with her, she was an old flame of Johnny Depp. They were together between 1994 and 1998. The reason why she was brought into this case at all was because Amber had made a comment during her direct examination in her case in chief about the stairs incident where Whitney was involved with her, saying something along the lines of that she got very worried because she thought about the Kate Moss stairs incident. Now, by making that comment, she brought into question something that Johnny may have done to his old flame, Kate Moss, while they were in a relationship. And because of that, she gave Johnny the opportunity to bring in Kate Moss as a rebuttal witness to talk specifically about whatever incident that was rumored to have happened and to, ideally for Johnny's case, dispel those rumors entirely. Now, as I mentioned, Kate Moss's testimony was absolutely to the point and exactly what Johnny would have needed and wanted in her testimony. Basically, what she said was that back when they were together in the 90s, they were in Jamaica together, specifically on some kind of a trip. She was leaving a hotel room when it was raining outside, and she ended up sliding down the stairs and hurting her back. She maintained that Johnny wasn't even really around for the fall, but that he came running when she did fall, picked her up, took her back, and took care of her. She maintained also that Johnny never pushed, kicked, or threw her down any stairs during the 4 years of their relationship. So once again, this is some clear contradiction from Amber's version of events, and it only helps to help Johnny's case and hurt Amber's. Moving on, then we heard from Dr. Shannon Curry, again, brought back on recall. Dr. Curry was brought in basically to rebut Dr. Hughes' testimony, and she did a very effective job of basically dismantling it piece by piece. She testified that she had 3 main issues with Dr. Hughes' testimony. First, she said that Dr. Hughes made misrepresentations of her own tests and her own results. Second, she said that she made misrepresentations of Dr. Curry's tests and results. And finally, she said that Dr. Hughes presented all of her own opinions as well as Amber Heard's opinions, all as facts. Now, for number 1 and number 2 on that list, Dr. Curry talked about how a person being evaluated always has an interest in appearing in a way that helps their case. This means that you need to operationalize them with methods that either reveal their attempts to skew the results or hide your methods better. And according to Dr. Curry, because PTSD is the most frequently feigned impairment in civil courts, this is why you're not supposed to just give a basic checklist of PTSD symptoms to someone like Amber Heard so that she can just check off boxes with her own self-reporting. Interestingly enough, Dr. Curry pointed out that in Amber's case, when she was taking tests that had a lot of face-valid questions for PTSD, her scores for PTSD were very high, meaning that according to Dr. Curry, she was able to pick out those questions as very clearly testing for PTSD and amplify those responses. On the other hand, also according to Dr. Curry, when she was taking tests that were low on questions that were obviously testing for PTSD, Amber's results showed to be very low scores of PTSD and actually a minimization of any mental health issue. And according to Dr. Curry, ultimately this means that what it shows is that Amber is probably actually trying to manipulate those results so that it looks like she has PTSD when in fact she does not. And to drive the final nail into Amber's PTSD case, she said that generally speaking, someone with a real case of PTSD is not going to be able to be as high functioning as what Amber is. Dr. Curry said that they're often homebound and not going to events or dinner parties, not going out and reading books or doing sommelier training. Essentially, according to Dr. Curry, someone with PTSD is not going to be doing all of the things that Amber has been able to do over the years. Now, after Dr. Curry testified, we were all very surprised to see Johnny Depp testifying as a rebuttal witness, especially at this particular juncture. Honestly, thinking back on it, I'm not sure why he was brought up on recall at all, other than maybe as a judgment call to call into question Whitney's credibility after she testified in support of Amber. Even still, this was one of the weakest points of the day for Johnny's case, in my opinion. Like in his direct examination in his own case in chief previously, Johnny started off fairly slowly, but eventually the direct examiner was able to draw out of him that the first time that he even knew of Waldman's statements about Amber, the alleged hoax statements that are at issue in this case, was in Amber's counterclaims when she filed them in August 2020. After he bounced around over a number of subjects, testifying that he got Amber into her role for Aquaman, and then some bits about taking MDMA and his injuries while on the Orient Express, he finally got into a couple pieces that seemed fairly interesting. First was the subject of Whitney, where Johnny testified that Whitney had a strange relationship with her sister Amber. Specifically, he said that Whitney's role was a strange combination of a loving sister, trusted sister and friend, and then lackey, punching bag, and dartboard, and a recipient of demeaning words and wine splashed in her face. He testified that while he never saw any physical full blowouts, he did see tons of verbal ones. Now, this was good testimony because it was finally someone who was commenting on the nature of Whitney's relationship with Amber, and it calls into question the credibility of Whitney as a witness here. That said, given the risks involved with putting Johnny up on the stand to begin with during his rebuttal, I wonder if we could have gotten similar testimony instead through a witness like Isaac Baruch. Anyway, then Johnny went on to testify about Joel Mandel to basically take down his credibility by explaining that Mr. Mandel embezzled a ton of money from Johnny and that Johnny sued him and others for that embezzlement. Johnny said that while the case settled out of court, Mandel was nevertheless very bitter against Johnny. Now, while I think that this actually did do some good work in calling into question Mr. Mandel's credibility as a witness, all of that said, Rottenborn's cross-examination that followed this direct examination scored some pretty big points against Johnny today. First off, I should mention that we had Rottenborn on his A game in terms of cross-examination. The first time that he cross-examined Johnny was really not exactly his best form that we saw in this trial. But as this trial has gone on, he seems to have finally hit his stride around halfway through the case, and his matchup against Johnny just felt pretty brutal at some points. And while some pointed out that it looked too much like Rottenborn was just being a rude man, beating up on another man while he was down, I personally didn't really see the same level of rudeness from Rottenborn, maybe partly because his tone was actually relatively mellowed out in comparison to before. Anyway, during this cross-examination, Rottenborn was able to dig up some text messages that were bad text messages from Johnny to his sister, Christy Dombrowski, and to his former agent, Christian Carino, both of them about Amber. Now, neither of these were particularly probative about whether or not Johnny abused Amber, but they did suggest that Johnny wanted to get Amber fired, and they had some really nasty words to say about her in the months following her public divorce and TRO filings. But looking back on those text messages, especially after the redirect, I have to say that neither of those really was that damaging, especially in comparison to a lot of the stuff that we have already seen in this case about Johnny and his text messages and the types of language that he uses. And especially because on redirect here, he was able to explain things to a reasonable degree. The one thing in the cross-examination that I think did leave more of a lasting mark, however, was Rottenborn's cross on the Orient Express photo, where he compared that photo to another version with different lighting, which made it look like Johnny had just had a shadow on his face rather than a bruise. As part of this cross-examination, Rottenborn also brought up other photos from earlier in that trip, which suggested the same kind of shadowing on his face in the same location that made it look like he had a bruise. Now, I don't know why Johnny's team even brought up the Orient Express in the first place, since Amber's testimony on the subject and on that incident that she alleges really didn't seem credible at all. After this cross-examination, it definitely felt like his team was maybe not trying, but maybe succeeding in snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. But maybe there's some other strategy there that I simply didn't connect. In the end, Johnny came out looking a little bit less credible overall, and Rottenborn was able to introduce some doubt as to Johnny's character. Now, while I don't think that that's enough to change the momentum of this case, still, if there was any big blunder by Johnny's team, in my opinion, it was probably putting him back up on rebuttal. Anyway, then we got to hear from another surprise rebuttal witness in Morgan Tremaine. Anyway, next we heard from Morgan Tremaine, who is a second surprise rebuttal witness and a former employer of TMZ. TMZ, of course, as you will remember, is who published the leaked video of Johnny abusing kitchen cabinets, as Johnny put it. Mr. Tremaine testified about that leaked video, as well as about the paparazzi at the DVTRO hearing in Los Angeles. Specifically, Mr. Tremaine testified that as for Amber's DVTRO hearing, the paparazzi are only ever at the courthouse if they're tipped off about a celebrity filing. And in this particular case for Amber's hearing, as we know, there were paparazzi there. And I can say that as an attorney who has operated out of Stanley Mosk Courthouse quite a bit myself, I can confirm that in the many times that I've been there, I've never seen paparazzi there ever. Anyway, he also testified that when it comes to the copyright of materials, he said that TMZ will own the copyright in one of three routes. First, of course, if they shot it themselves, they'll own the copyright that way. Second, if they got it from someone who purchased it from the original source, that's another way to get it. And finally, they'll get it from the original source themselves. Interestingly enough, he said that TMZ will generally only fast track a piece of content to the public if it comes directly from the source. And in this particular case, he said that when it came to the kitchen video, it was in fact fast tracked. Although he didn't say exactly who that source was, he did leave enough breadcrumbs for the jury to basically conclude that the most likely source of that kitchen video was probably Amber or someone very, 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 very close to her acting on her behalf. And finally, for one last interesting point on that kitchen video, he said that the video that TMZ actually received from the source was much shorter than the one that he understands was played at trial, meaning that TMZ did not alter it to end on a particularly ominous and ambiguous note in a way that suggests that Johnny was abusing Amber at the end of that video, but rather that it already came altered that way to them. Moving on, next we heard from Brian Newmeister. Brian Newmeister is a forensic expert on the metadata issue related to Amber's photos. He testified to all of the issues in the metadata of Amber's photos as they were turned over from her legal team. Basically, as a result of his analysis and the issues that he encountered with the anomalies within the data itself, he said that there's simply no way for any forensic analyst to authenticate those photos. And to illustrate, he had a really great demonstrative where he showed two different photos of Amber's face that were actually introduced as evidence for two separate incidents. In the demonstrative, he made one of them fairly transparent and slowly shifted it over to the top of the other to show that they are, in fact, the exact same photo, right down to the little wisps of hair coming from Amber's temple. Effectively, this destroys Amber's case right here, since the only thing that is even remotely objective corroboration for her case is the photos that she presents of her supposed injuries. She doesn't really have corroboration with other witnesses since her account diverges from everyone, even the other witnesses that are supporting her case. And there's no video that has been introduced that really supports her position either, especially looking at the TMZ video in its full context. So if all of her photos are essentially bunk, the most that she has is a non-contextualized audio recordings, but those recordings in context generally favor Johnny's case. So even though Johnny did in fact have a pretty terrible cross-examination, in my opinion, and he never should have been called for rebuttal, Mr. Newmeister is a strong reason why this day still ends up a win for Johnny's camp. Anyway, the last witness that we heard from in day 22 was Beverly R Leonard. Miss Leonard testified in a short video deposition, and she testified to specifically an altercation at the baggage claim at LAX from years ago between Amber Heard and her former partner, Tasya Van Ree, who she didn't actually identify by name, but identified her as her travel companion. According to Miss Leonard, Amber grabbed Tasya and pulled something off of her neck, probably a necklace of some sort. And when Miss Leonard went up to investigate, she said that Tasya had an abrasion on her neck as a result. Now, Miss Leonard could not testify to more than that, so the jury didn't get to hear about Amber getting arrested by Miss Leonard or other police officers. Of course, this goes to indicate that Amber has a history of abusing partners, and on a day when Johnny's partner history has been quite cleared up by Kate Moss, no less. How powerful this bit of testimony ends up being, of course, is entirely up to the jury, and at this point, we still can't really know exactly what they're thinking. Anyway, that's where it ended for today. Judge Oscarati said that the Heard legal team had around an hour and 15 minutes, and the Depp legal team has around 7 hours and 9 minutes going into the final day of testimony. And apparently, Johnny has one more witness to place in rebuttal before his side rests to head into closing arguments. And if there is any more time left for Amber's ultimate rebuttal due to her counterclaims, she's got about an hour to put on some kind of a witness for a final rebuttal. I'm hearing rumors that that could be Amber Heard herself. I don't know if there's time for it, or even if there's time for it, if that's particularly wise, but we will see. But did you see Day 22's testimony? If so, I would love to hear your thoughts. Let us know in the comments down below. Anyway, if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded, and so you can join us for the last day of testimony in this case, Day 23 of the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial, live streamed with legal commentary right here on this channel. See you in the next video.